fish will not be seen tonight. This is a TV-3 special report from here in Kuala Lumpur. Ikan tidak akan dilihat malam ini. Ini laporan khas TV-3 dari sini di Kuala Lumpur.
Good evening. Two events last night and their aftermath today have dominated the news. New York City went totally dark last night, and tonight large parts of the city still are without power. And a U.S. Army helicopter strayed over the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea and was shot down by the North Koreans. 3 Americans were killed and a 4th wounded and captured. We'll tell you about that and about how the White House handled the potentially explosive incident later in this program. Today, the lights were coming on again in parts of New York City, and the citizens there are just beginning to calculate the tremendous cost in confidence and in dollars of last night's total blackout. We have several reports on that. First from New York, Roger Grimsby.
The clock stopped exactly 24 hours ago, along with just about everything else here in New York. The only lights were automobile lights, otherwise the Great White Way was pitch black. Broadway theaters and restaurants closed up while you could eat by candlelight. It was very difficult to cook by it. Thousands were stranded in the city when airlines, commuter trains, and subways were knocked out of service. Thousands of others, all ages, took to the streets just for the fun of it. After all, New York City gets blacked out only once every 12 years. And there were thousands of others who took to the streets to plunder and to pillage. Over 2,500 looters and vandals arrested during the first 8 hours of the blackout. Many more got away. The looters concentrated on small businesses, mostly in the poorer sections of the city, where unemployment and crime are chronically high. There were more than 40 serious fires. 2 firemen died. Some of the fires were deliberately set. Compounding the problem, false alarms, 1,100 of them. Mayor Beam summed it all up by calling it a night of terror. How did it all begin on one of the hottest, steamiest nights of the year in New York City? Well, to the north, towering thunderstorms jolted the rich suburb of Westchester County. Lightning knocked out transmission lines, setting off a cascading series of power station failures. And lights began flickering for 10 million residents in the metropolitan New York area. No lights, no refrigeration, no appliances, no air conditioning, no television, no elevators, and in some of the worst cases, no water. The city was closed down for the day. Things are now taking a turn for the better since it all began 24 hours ago. Don Farmer has details.
Right now, the power people tell us that they have restored service to at least 90% of the metropolitan area. But that still does leave several 100,000 New Yorkers sweating, many in the dark, many without water. But the good news is that things are getting better every hour. We are told just a few moments ago now that the power has gone out again in some portions of the city which had been restored to power earlier in the day. Part of Kennedy Airport is dark again, we're told, and at least 3 other neighborhoods in the borough of Queens are dark again. But the power company officials had predicted that that might happen, the surge of power causing more power outages as the lights begin to flicker back on. But we can tell you now that things are getting better every hour. Most of the trains and buses and planes are running. They're in business, if not always on schedule. Most of the radio and television stations and newspapers are operating again. The electric company now says its educated guess, its hope is that full power will be restored to the entire New York area by midnight tonight. The political leaders already are into some hot arguments over who's to blame for all of this, but the worst of the real crisis seems to be over now. Still, this has been a miserable day for millions of New Yorkers. The problem which began last night did not burn off with the sunrise, and many of those people who could sleep, many of them could not, but those who could awoke to discover that there was more hot... The problems which began last night did not burn off with the sunrise. Many of those people who could sleep awoke to more hot, muggy weather and more troubles. The power had not been restored to at least half the affected area. And the troubles were compounded by the troublemakers, the looters, the thieves. By mid-afternoon, more than 2,700 persons had been arrested, most of them for looting. 1 policeman had been shot. As many as 78 policemen have been injured so far. And the fires roared into the dawn. 650 separate fires in the city by late afternoon. 2 persons died in them. More than 40 firemen were injured. But the peaceful people tried to maintain a tenuous routine. doing something silly, but needing to do something as they waited, frustrated. Others lined up to buy food and drink, whatever wouldn't melt or mold or spoil. And others toasted their troubles with that widely favored, short but sure cure, strong drink. And those who hardly ever worry about anything didn't worry about this. The water was for using, for folks whose high-rise buildings need power to get water pressure in upper floors. But the children used it for playing. Satisfaction, not survival, was their concern.